Bonjour tout le monde! Hi guys! So today I'm going to be telling you all about the French DELF B2 exam, which is the qualification that gives you the minimum level of fluency, if you like, in French and enables you to be able to go to university in France or even have a job in France. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what it is and why I took it personally, whether it's worth taking it, when and how did I take the exam, what was the level I had before taking the exam, some in detailed context of the exam itself, and how to revise for it. So if you're interested in hearing my tips and tricks, then stay tuned. So, what exactly is the DELF and why is it worth taking it? So the DELF is a French language assessment based on the Common European Framework of Reference for Language that ranges from A1 being the first and easiest level and goes up to C2, that is the hardest and final level. In order to pass this exam, you will be tested in 4 different areas: listening comprehension, writing comprehension, reading comprehension, and then an oral test. This is performed with a native speaker. It is your comprehension, expression, interaction, and mediation that is essentially examined and will give you a qualification that is recognised internationally. And the reason that the B2 is such a landmark level is, like I said, because it's often considered the minimum level to be able to work in France or to be able to go to university in France. And it's a qualification that recognises that you have a certain degree of fluency and of independence in speech and language. So on the official website of the DELF, it states that at this level, the candidate has a certain degree of spontaneity and fluency, correcting his or her own mistakes. So I was told that university students studying at university a foreign language that is essentially not their native language should hope to have the level B2 by the end of finishing their first year. So if you're British like myself, you could essentially say that it's one step further than the A-level qualification, but it is hard to say exactly. But like I said, it's very much an international qualification that will definitely be recognised more so in France than the A-level, or at least that was the case for me, and it can be more easily interpreted by employers or teachers, so it's a really overall useful qualification to have. So, where and when did I take the exam? So I finished the end of school when I was 18 in 2018, and then I took a gap year in France from September 2018 to September 2019. So I had just taken and passed my French A-level in the summer of 2018, and then I took the DELF exam itself in March of 2019. So it was about 10 months after having taken my last French exam. I then started researching as soon as I took my gap year in France at the start of September as to where and when I could take the DELF exam. So on the CIEP, the official website of the DELF, there is an official list of establishments that host the exam. So I looked for the closest establishment to me, which was the University of Poitiers, which is in the region that I was taking my gap year. And then I looked on their website and I checked the CFLE, or the Centre de Français Langue Étrangère Art, to see when they were holding their next exam. And I think, if I remember correctly, they were holding about 2 to 3 sessions per year. So one in autumn, winter, and then one in spring, and then one in summer. So I chose the one in March, and I had to download a registration form where I had to fill in a few details about myself and then send them a check as well. So the cost of the B2 when I took it was €130, and it has to be made payable to the specific language centre of the university or establishment where you'll be taking it. But obviously they will let you know on the specific site where it's going to be made payable to. So they then sent me a letter of confirmation and where and when exactly the exam would be held. So it was pretty straightforward. And again, on the CIEP DELF website, there is a list of official establishments outside of France as well. So if you're not able to come to France, it doesn't matter, you can take it in other countries as long as it is an official establishment. And the process of applying is fairly similar, and the payment as well, as far as I can recall when I was looking into potentially taking it in the UK. So, what was the level of French I had like before I took the exam, and how did I prepare for it? So like I said, I had already passed my A-level French qualification in the UK prior to coming to France and taking the DELF. So I guess you could say I had a level B1 roughly before taking it. I have to admit the DELF B2 was quite a jump from the A-level, but that was mainly because of the style and type of language that they tested that was quite different to what I was used to. And additionally, I didn't take any preparatory classes for the DELF, whereas you obviously spend 2 years working and preparing and revising for your A-level, and you take the exam exam at the end of the 2 years, or at least that's the process in the UK. So the reason that I actually didn't take any preparatory classes for the DELF itself was mainly to do with the location of where I was based during my gap year. I didn't take my gap year in the same city where I actually took the exam itself and where they were offering classes, and I didn't have a car nor access to public transport into and out of that city, so that reduced the likelihood of me being able to realistically commute there. Plus, I already felt like I had a good enough level, and the reason I wanted to take a gap year was to do voluntary work as well as find some paid work and get out and about in the community and improve my French on the go. And I had 6 months to do that before the exam itself, so that really upped my level. So in terms of preparing for it, like I said, the whole goal of my gap year was to deepen my understanding of French on a more conversational level, and I really benefited from being able to speak to natives on a day-to-day basis. So I did quite a few things on a voluntary basis, for example working in a school as a language assistant and helping kids with their homework and things like that. And then I worked in a bar, which was great for my conversational skills. I also did a lot of prep at home, so there were a lot of resources on the CIEP website with examples of past papers and questions, and there were a few sample questions of what kinds of things to expect for the writing and speaking tasks as well. So when I ran out of those, I was able to create my own questions based on the examples that I'd already seen, and I also utilised my resources and asked native people that I knew to help mark it and correct it. I also searched on YouTube for examples of the oral test, and there were plenty of videos where you could listen to an audio and then they would provide you with the comprehension questions that accompanied it, and then finally they'd give you the answers so that you can mark your own work. Then I also asked a native if she would help me prepare for the speaking element of the exam. So I told them how the exam was going to be structured, and then I chose a random topic or theme and practiced presenting it to them and then discussing it afterwards and having them ask me a few questions about it, obviously within the time frame of the exam itself. So I was lucky that I was able to practice and prepare within the authentic environment, but if you do not have the opportunity, I would suggest to try and get as close as possible to it by doing things such as reading newspaper or journal articles or listening to French radio or television, because the thing that I felt that was quite different that was tested in the DELF compared to the A-level that I did was that in the DELF it used very much current affairs. There was a lot of political language or argumentative language, very formal and informative, often factual, which is the kind of thing you'll be exposed to if you are keeping track of the current affairs and political state in France. So that will give you a real heads up as to what to expect when it comes to the exam itself. So, going into the actual content of the exam, it's comprised of 4 different sections, as I mentioned. So for me, the speaking section was scheduled to be on a different day, on the next day after the previous 3 exams that I had done. So it required me to stay over in the city where I took it. The other 3 sections take roughly 2.5 hours. You have 30 minutes for the listening section, which is played first at the start of the exam, and then 2 hours for the reading and writing section of the exam, with the idea that you spend about an hour on each. But it's a complete paper, so you can go back and check things and alter things within each section. So first, the listening section. So on the website it states that there is a comprehension questionnaire dealing with 3 recordings, an interview or a news bulletin, etc. that's only played once, a presentation, speech, lecture, documentary, radio or television program that is played twice, and it says that the maximum duration of recordings is 8 minutes and is out of 25 marks, as are all the sections. They're all evenly weighted. So yes, you'll note that the first recording is only played once, so you do have to get down as much information as possible. So they will give you a chance to have a look at the paper and read through the questions first, but I recall it wasn't actually that long, so just skim through it, give yourself an idea of the kind of thing that you're supposed to be answering, and really be prepared to note down as much as possible when you hear that audio. I would also say what's important here is to write down something for every question, even if you don't know the answer, because I was so sure that on some questions I had scored absolutely nothing, and then when I got my marks back I saw that in fact I had actually scraped some marks, and so that must have been because I wrote down something that was in relation to the question to show that there was a level of understanding, even if it wasn't the exact correct answer they're looking for. So never miss out a question. Additionally, I remember that at least I think 2 of the recordings were from radio stations where someone calls in to discuss something via a phone, so it can be a bit muffled muffled and often the audio was slightly unclear. And of course the audio is played on a tape in front of the whole class, so you don't have any control as to whether you're going to pause it or rewind it. I know in my A-level I had a little headset and we had an electronic player, so you had complete control as to how much you listened to of one section compared to another, but that is not the case for the DELF. It is under the control of the examiner. So you really have to have some keen ears, and one thing I would advise you to do is to really train your ears to get used to listening to radio recordings like that, so that you won't be so flustered when you get to the exam itself. So the reading section of the exam, again on the website it states that it's composed of comprehension questionnaires dealing with 2 written documents, a text of an informational nature regarding France or the French-speaking world, and a text of an argumentative nature. So I guess that is fairly ambiguous, but I do remember that for me I had a slightly scientific article that was definitely of a formal nature that required me to answer questions based upon it, and the good thing was that the questions were in order of the text. So if you had answered one question, missed out another question, and then answered the question below that, you would know roughly in the text where you were supposed to be looking to find the answer for the question that you hadn't yet worked out. The articles do tend to use more elevated lexis, so like I said, familiarising yourself with the kind of material that's in newspapers will give you a good idea and will get you used to the kind of things to expect. Okay, so moving on to the writing section. So again, on the website it says that you take a personal stand, contributing to a debate, writing a formal letter, or a review of a film or book. So I think for me, I had to write a letter to my boss and explain why I deserved a promotion that would enable me to do more travelling and utilise my language skills within the company. Obviously this was entirely hypothetical, but it's good to plan out first the main body of what you're going to say, and to also be aware of the kind of style that you're writing in. So for me, this had to be fairly elevated and formal, and I had to address my boss correctly and sign it off correctly. So be aware of the types of conventions that belong to each genre that you could be asked to write about, and it's a good idea to prepare the kinds of things that you will be asked in advance. I'd say the content of what you're going to say is of less importance, but it's good to show that you've used some opinion and some opinion phrases, as well as using various tense structures appropriately and correctly, and just to add little features like the subjunctive, etc., just to show that you have that flair. But keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it. You need to show them that you can manipulate the language accordingly, not present the longest and most complex sentence in the world. And then finally, moving on to the speaking. So like I said, I actually took mine the next day after I'd completed the other 3 parts of the exam. Again, the website states that you should state and defend an opinion based on a short document designed to elicit a reaction. So I was given a choice of a few documents, of which I had to choose 1 that were on different subjects, so I had free choice of which to choose. And then I was given about 5 minutes to make notes on it and get down as many ideas as possible, and then I could bring that with me into the exam. So for me, I talked about the advantages and the disadvantages of the specific subject, which for me was something related to vegetarianism, if I remember correctly. And then at the end, the examiner posed me a few questions on what I had already discussed, and then she posed her own questions entirely. So it lasts about 20 minutes, so don't rush or else you will run out of things to say. So don't say everything that you've written down and prepared for when you're first presenting it. Save some points for when you are questioned at the end of that little presentation, because again, you will run out of ideas if you're not careful. So for me, I'd stored some stock phrases inside my head, lots of opinion phrases, again, some subjunctives that I thought I could slip in and bulk it out and make it sound more professional. But don't be afraid to pause and reflect on what you say, because the examiner is aware that you're not a trained public speaker and obviously that you're not a native, so don't be afraid to take your time. So it then took me a couple of months or so to receive my results and to know that I passed. And then you either have 2 options. You can go to the establishment yourself and receive the qualification with the certificate and sign for it, or you can get it delivered in the post, so that was super simple. So the process really was fairly straightforward from start to end. And I think if you prepare well enough, it should be something that is, albeit challenging, definitely doable. And it's a super useful international qualification to have under your belt. So I hope this video gave you a little insight as to the procedure and the process. And if you have any further questions, don't be afraid to get in touch or leave a comment down in the comments below. Give the video a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more Francophone content as well as more advice and tip videos like this one. And don't forget to check out the other videos on my channel. Okay, so that's it for today's video, guys, and I will see you in my next video. À bientôt les amis!